So I wanted to go into have a look at Bosch today, and the reason why I'm doing this is because I remember reading a while back, and I can't remember exactly the reference, but it was from Rudolf Steiner, um, and he's speaking here about how Bosch is expressing part of the astral body of Christian Rosenkreuz. And that's part of what I'd like to look at today. What does that mean, the astral body of Christian Rosenkreuz, and what does that mean at all? We know, many people know the link between Hieronymous Bosch in the esoteric tradition and Christian Rosenkreuz. And that's maybe, these subjects are maybe not known to people, but you can go and find out about Hieronymous Bosch as the builder of the temple under Solomon. And those three figures, Solomon, Hieronymous Bosch, and Hieronymous of Tyre, who Hieronymous Bosch worked under. These are all very significant figures in the Freemasonic tradition, and this indication that Christian Rosenkreuz can be, his astral body can be perceived in these paintings of Bosch, is something that I've always been intrigued about. And so it's something I thought I would bring today and just talk about it and explore it a bit, how that can be the case, without going into a kind of lengthy exposition about the history of Christian Rosenkreuz and Rosicrucianism. No, really just focusing here on, can we just deepen this one statement, this one sentence, that the astral body of Christian Rosenkreuz can be seen in this painting from Hieronymus Bosch of the 16th century. And we know that Christian Rosenkreuz has this kind of magical ability to be able to inspire, work through other thinkers and into their artistic and literary works. And that's what's I find interesting here. We have obviously an very accomplished master at work here in painting. And so it's like, it's looking into what he has created, the images, and then picking up a bit of this feeling, this mood of Christian Rosenkreuz through these paintings. And if we bring Christian Rosenkreuz in relation to Hieronymous Bosch, and further back to the Cain stream that, as we know from the Bible, separates itself from Abel, the priestly stream, and then until the two unite, they come, it is then they are in this polarized relationship with each other, where you have the Abel stream and the Cain stream, and then at Golgotha with John the Baptist and with Christian Rosenkreuz, the two come together. And this is another theme of the Rudolf Steiner's last address, and it's something just to hold on the back burner as we're speaking, for how these depictions can show us this descent into the scientific, materialistic paradigm that unfolds in Europe from early modern Europe onwards. So from the 12th, 13th centuries onwards, and as the development of science and this descent into materialism unfolds in what Rudolf Steiner calls the fifth post-Atlantean epoch, it's that development of humanity that I think we can explore here in these pictures of Bosch, where we see all of the things that affect that growing human society. And in this case, it's a hellish vision, the scenes of plague and war and pestilence and death. And I think this is probably the best way to depict what we mean when we talk about astral or astrality, that the stars, the spiritual world, the world of those spiritual beings, comes to manifestation in what we see around us. And so if human beings are, in a sense, the most perfect form of that in what we see around us, if we think of all of the complexity of a flower or a crystal, or then up to the animal form, the human being is like the most perfect form that we will see before us in manifestation. And so when we look out at these depictions of what many human beings do together in society, in history, in all of the drama that we see behind me in this depiction of hell, this is where it gets very interesting, especially for an artist, to allow his whole being to live in such depictions. And then we can see, we can really have an experience of how the spiritual world looks because of the amount of consciousness that's gone into a painting like this. So if we think of the incredible detail, painstaking mixing, and the hours, the months, the years that goes into such a painting, with its studies of the human figure and with the mixing of the different paints and the preparing of the canvas, all of this is an incredible amount of human will that goes into a painting like this. And then the depiction of the senses, of how the senses bring, the senses of the painter bring these spiritual experiences to the eyes of the audience, that we then see, in a sense, through his eyes. And all of this would also then lead into our theme. If we can then so see through the eyes of Bosch, what are the eyes that are looking through Bosch's eyes from the other direction? And that's where we can come to this understanding of Christian Rosenkreuz as a more highly developed human being, as an initiate beyond the pay grade of normal people, because of that initiation back at the time of Christ, where he was then called forth from the grave, and what that means then for his subsequent development. And what I'm arguing here is that that subsequent development has an ability to see things visually in the truth, in their truth of what is taking place in the outside world, as a clairvoyant dramatization of the world we see around us. And I think this is also something that all of humanity is doing, is on this path to develop this. So I think it's really not something so strange for us to understand that slowly, imaginatively, this is a world that we're opening up to. So whether we see ourselves as, if you see like behind my left arm, you have he's kind of looking up at me. The little guy is kind of looking up at me on the, oh, I blocked him now. There he is. So he's there looking up at me at the table. So whether it's this, now he's looking up under my arm. Whether it's this guy at the table looking up, or then the dead skeleton army to his right, this great drama of life, or if we look up to the guy at the top left behind me on the hill, about to be beheaded on the hill before the gallows further in the background. Or then if we come back down to the right, just above my right shoulder, we have then the church, we have the monks, also as skeletons, being led into various degrees of torture by other skeletons. And there's something terribly macabre about this, and dark, but there's also something very liberating to be confronted in this way, in a sense, with one of the deep truths of our lives, that our lives end in death. And the great powers that we go to, the great lengths we go to, rather, because of this power of death, the great lengths we go to engage in all kinds of pursuits in avoidance of this great trauma that is always hanging over us, of death and its pain and its suffering, that in our sanitized world we'd rather box away. So these depictions, medieval we could say, have a drama of a truth of death. And as we'll see, as we'll go on, we'll look at some of Bosch's more positive depictions of the Garden of Earthly Delights. And then we'll also look at the Bosch altar from Venice with the Crucifixion of Julia, or is sometimes called under another name. Anyway, I will put that in the info below. But we'll look at those too. And what we're looking at here is a theme that goes throughout the work of Bosch, which is this incredible ability, and this is part of this exploration of the astral body of Christian Rosenkreuz, which is what I'm arguing here, an astral body that has been brought to a higher degree of functioning, of imagination. And you could say, well, this is any artist has this imagination, but it's specifically the relation between this imagination and the specificity, yeah, there you go. I won't try again. The specific nature of how this astral nature that we all have, the ability to feel one and desire life, let's say it like that, to think our way into life with the things that we strive for, which we desire in life, which we go out to get. And that astrality, which can have higher levels and lower levels of a more noble, idealistic side, and we see that depicted. It could be an army, it could be a king, it could be state, king and country, it could be religion. And it can be the lower astral, where we see here gluttony, vice, violence, burning, execution. And we can see all this, yeah. But what we're looking for is to appreciate that we speak in anthroposophy of how the astral body can, when the ich works on our astral body, we can develop this to a spirit self. And this appreciation of ourselves, giving a unified stamp on all that we see and experience sensually, would be that connection to the spiritual. And what I'm arguing here is that Bosch is able to express some of that personality of Christian Rosenkreuz because of the way he paints, the content of what he paints, these vast depictions of humanity in a semi-allegorical, semi-biblical, as the narrative running through it, which we can see then in for example, in Garden of Earthly Delights. Let's move on to that. So it's, yes, it's biblical narratives, but if we compare this biblical narrative with other ones of the time, we won't find the same, how should I put it? The same sense that here is like a classification, an almost scientific exactness of many things that would be developed later actually in human history. So this is, Bosch is around, 1500s. And you see here on the right something that almost looks like surreal art in this depiction of hell. That's on the right panel. So and then these various contraptions, almost like thermostats, and again something almost out of the 1920s or something, in that kind of surreal nature. And this would all be quite fitting, as with Christian Rosenkreuz, as being as a being far ahead of his time, leading humanity, inspiring into other painters, other thinkers, part of his own experience of how the spirit plays into the sensual world around us, and yet is deeply Christian. If we see on the left, I'll see if I can get a better one here. Of the Garden of Earthly Delights. And then we can have a look at this. So this is the here we go. It's still the biblical narrative. But look at how the figures rest. Look at how the man, Adam, touches the ground here. Now, these are all conscious choices. Look at how the Eve figure almost is resting her knee as if the land itself would be a piece of furniture, as if it would be a stool. And then if we look at how she touches the ground, but they almost have like a porcelain quality. Or if we look to the forms of the tree, look at this tree in terms of its, now that's also a conscious decision how one depicts that tree. And that tree is almost as if it has limbs, or as if it would be a investigation of how one would depict a tree in a human form. Or further, we can look at the back. Again, the owl in this figure at the top in a kind of porcelain form. And we ask ourselves, what is that? Is that some kind of weird tambourine? Or this quite lovely leopard down here having caught something. And then there's something, again, quite unique for Bosch, which is and I think also something that comes from Christian Rosenkreuz, which is how these figures are on the border between animal figures and starting to take on human elemental characteristics. So if we look at this figure here, he's almost become dressed in a kind of overcoat, eating this frog. And this is something, again, about the spiritual scientific path, or the anthroposophical path, or the path of spirit as a science, is to recognize what these depictions are prefiguring in human consciousness about how an awakening from materialism and the potential of science to prepare us for this is through our thinking to engage with the world around us as if it were mixed, as if the elements would be mixed. And if you see what I mean here, with Bosch, if you look at the tree line behind Eve. We have a sense of perspective, sure. But it's also like a flat space. This green area has a sense for its shape as a piece of a puzzle, as this area does underneath, and then the bottom area, and then how this piece of the puzzle has been almost as if cut out, again with a precision. And this is quite essential, this precision of how things are cut, the shaping of them, as if they are being crafted by an expert craftsman. And what I'm arguing is this is not just Bosch. Of course, he is an expert craftsman of the craft of painting. But I'm encouraging us to see, in terms of Christian Rosenkreuz, that part of this expert crafting of the artistic elements with the content and the color and the harmony and the exactness, and further this porcelain quality of the surface of things, and how the surface of things can come to life, is very much part of this mystery of Christian Rosenkreuz. Because this, from an anthroposophical perspective, we would say this is the deepest point of spirit man, is that the sentient body is the place where we find this door to the resurrection body of Christ. And when we think of Christian Rosenkreuz as being raised by Christ as the first to experience this new initiation, this is part of the relationship that we see here between Christ, and we could almost say like a Lazarus, a representative of this Lazarus figure in Adam here. Yeah. So I'm encouraging us to, again, to go into this gaze of Adam as a door, to see how Christian Rosenkreuz is in a way looking through this painting at us, to us. And then one can be drawn in a very lovely way to the very knowing look. So all of this, if we understand it in a painterly way, as a painter knows that this pink with which Christ is dressed, we come then instinctively from the porcelain, the incarnate, naked Adam and Eve very demure here with her gaze inward. And then look, this almost adoration, this Adam looking at Christ and the demure Eve, and how then this prepares us for this pink experience in the clothing of Christ. And then, as if from somewhere deep, and this is a good exercise to do, to go into these eyes of Christ and to see, to say to yourself, from where are those eyes looking at us? Are they looking from the black of the pond here? We can check back with those eyes. Are we looking from the black of this unicorn in the pond, or these various animals, or this duck reading a book? So there's a kind of cuteness, a humor, and yet Christ holds our eyes very steady. Or this wonderful leopard holding some form of prey. Or then this little hare here with its two ears sticking up. So these are almost like icons, emojis almost. Look at this hair, incredible. And then if we go back to follow the theme that I was using before, this form like a jigsaw, we've then got the top blue form. And look at the composition here. There's a masterful use here of composition from the weight of this form in blue, the tree line, which is bringing us from a foreground with these apples in an almost musical development of the different plant forms here, from the one we already spoke of, the cactus-like form, through the forest with all its blossoming various fruits, and then out to more of a 2D, longer pond with this strange rock in the middle, and again an owl with its knowing look. So we have a choice. Is it the knowing look of the one-eyed owl at the top, or is it the look of Christ? Now, Christ, of course, is calmer, centered. We come into his body of pink. And over against here, we have a kind of challenge here from the owl, that we would stay in a kind of black hole. We would come into a different kind of perception here, and a different kind of occult perception. And all the way around, you know, Bosch is, there's such a richness here of these little tricks, these little games of, not of the intellect, little games of the visual perception. So that you are led not with your intellect, but you're led with your eye. And this part of this, again, is the mystery of Christian Rosenkreuz, that one can experience and follow. So there's also an incredible equality. And what I mean by equality is, look at the equality of the forms of the animal figures. Now you'll say, what do you mean equality? They're not equal, they're different forms and figures. Yes, but if you understand what I'm saying, look, there is a personal stamp on all of these forms, as if each form would be weighed and very precisely characterized. Look at this cormorant here, particularly nice. Or this underwater part of the reeding fish that is half duck. That each is very exactly characterized. Bosch here, and what I'm arguing is Christian Rosenkreuz through this is saying, I want a duck, I want it to read, I want it to be part fish. I will put that together and I will integrate it in the personality of the whole piece, so that each character relates to the other in a sense of unity. And you see this then here with the fish, as if motioning back. And again, this is all done in a very masterful, imaginative way, that it's very hard to find this, that I know of from another painter. And then again, the personality of how this is done, coming together with how the forms are put together, how the color is used, how it gives this surface-like porcelain quality that we spoke about before. So these are all, what I'm highlighting is, these are all ways in which we can come closer to this mystery of Christian Rosenkreuz through this painting and paintings like this. So I'm going to put that in the background. Put that in the background now, so we can have a look at this as we go through. So we can then move on to yeah, that's quite nice, isn't it? So as if he's watching over the shoulder, as if he's watching, regarding us. And it's a technique that's often used in painting, that there is a eye line holding us as the audience, appealing to us to engage, to come in to the painting. So again, it's differentiating it from that and saying there's something specific, something specifically inviting us in Bosch to this experience of Christian Rosenkreuz. Now, if we go on to a more close-up of one of these, of the Garden of Earthly Delights, I took this because what it shows, I think what it highlights, is again something that can appeal to us as extremely modern. Almost as if it's like a digital display on a smartphone or something in that right hand panel. As if it's almost like a digital screen. Or if we look down behind the right foot of this monk figure, we have a man praying under the stars in a kind of contraption. What is this contraption? Again, a very modern, almost digital, televisual depiction of something. And then we see this kind of, we might say it's a mocking of humanity. But I think that would be to put something negative into it that would not be there. I don't think it's a mocking of humanity. It's a presentation of a reality of humanity. So if we think when we are in our homes and we have our altar, our little altar, and we make our candles, and this is not mocking religious life, that we do these things in life, but it's a depiction of how that might look, that whole scene might look from a spiritual perspective. So if we were to clairvoyantly go back into, look back on us and what we are doing, or if we were to say, clairvoyantly in this sense, if we were to live in the walls around us and to look into our own houses and look at what we were doing in our own house, what would we see ourselves doing? We would have, for example, the reverie. We were maybe like I've been doing recently. We would be looking into astrology. And then we would say, how does this study of astrology look? Is it like a kind of television that you have going on in your head? Yeah, that you're imagining the stars. You reading about Pluto. You're reading about Pluto in Libra, for example. You haven't seen those stars. You've imagined it. Is that not like this figure behind his right foot? And again, it's not a mocking of the human being. It's saying these are the kind of games we play with ourselves. We're imagining the stars. We're saying, oh yeah, Pluto Libra means this. Pluto Cancer means this. Pluto Leo means this. And I'm going to imagine myself, my life, and I'm going to kind of pray to God that things work out for me and for other people I know. And I'm going to understand humanity. And I'm in my own little world. Like that I created this little vessel for myself where I'm kind of this little stick man praying to things. And then what's this? Like some kind of strange figurine? I don't even know what that is. Let's see if I can get in there. What is that figurine on the bottom left? Is it a witch? Some kind of devotional object? Is it a saint or something? A bit like the crucifix with the Christ here. And then what's this figure here that he's looking at? Is that he's pointing to that? Is he like in some kind of reverie about how Christ relates to Greek times? And like when we're reading a book and we're saying, oh my God, this is kind of linked. The story of Christ is linked to, and I'm reading about history and I'm seeing this in a picture. Like these, if you look carefully, there's like a sultan or something, like Middle East depictions on this round enclosed area that's enclosing the tree. So is it a mocking of this man, like saying, yeah, he's like studying nature and he loves Christ and he's very Christian and he's kind of doing some pre-modern or early modern musings on the world of nature and birds and butterflies and things like this? And then he's got his hat, he's taken off his hat here, he's got his beautiful pink cloak. And again, is it a mocking of humanity to do this, to have Christ at one moment with his pink clothes looking at us, and suddenly, okay, now Christ's clothes are now draped over this monk who's, in a way, we could say, doing something a bit ridiculous. But is it a mocking? I don't think it is. I think it's something very human. Because look at this bird here. Look at how this bird looks through the monk's eyes. Yeah? The pointiness of this yellow bird. Again, look at the consciousness in this yellow bird, so that your eye will be drawn. Look at the movement of the yellows and greens. So if you just hold this painting now in your mind's eye, and you go into the different greens and the different oranges, and you let them come alive in your feeling life, and you follow them in your feeling life, you'll come to this background. You'll see the stag on the hill at the back. You'll see this kind of squirrel in the lit Alp pasture just on top of the hill. And this light will speak to this blue light. But you'll follow this green and beige light, and it will take you round a movement of color, which is then coming up around the tree. So it's a movement through nature, a moving color experience of the light through nature that's coming around, forming like as a circle image down, as if like a river coming from the sky, through the different pastures, Alps, through the slopes, and this bear on the slope up here, the stag, through, around, and then, yeah, of course, we want to avoid the half bent over person with something stuck up his backside. Yeah. We're going to avoid that. And then, but then we find very precise, look at how exact this heron is, and how this heron in its exactness over against this yellow bird, white and yellow. And then we see this is again reflected in Christ, in the white and yellow of the circle around Christ, white and yellow. And again, if what I'm arguing here is that this is something of the beauty of this astrality, this astral body of Christian Rosenkreuz, that is able to bring these things in relation, as I said before, in equality. And again, what do I mean by equality? I mean that one might say purified of any opinion or commentary on how those things exist with each other, but that they exist in their reality, and that reality is an incredibly vital etheric reality about how the different forms and the different colors are related, and how they bring the different colors to life within their forms. So look at then this richness from the light of the upper pasture through our bird, down through the cloak, and to this blue, and onto this hat. So, coming back, we come back then to our Christ figure here. So we've looked at the Garden of Earthly Delights. We saw our hell picture. And then we saw, if I go back to that, no, if we go back to this, now what I'm interested in showing here is this depiction of hell is something I wanted to bring in relation to Pluto. Pluto as the planet of Hades, of hell. And then if we take Pluto itself, and you'll see where I'm going with this. If we look at Pluto itself, it has something of this. Yeah, I mean, just from the color. And if we would say, like, phenomenologically, how would we understand this? And we would say, this dryness, a sense of dryness, of sand, of a parched nature, and then almost like an eye within it. So if we go back, here we have it, a parched hell. Now, why is this important, this parched nature of hell? And if we compare it to, as I said, the garden, this is in no way parched. So the water, this experience of the water is quite significant here. And again, it's showing a being, it's showing an awareness of the elemental worlds. First of all, the dry nature of hell. And secondly, we could speak of an etheric experience of water in this depiction of from the Garden of Earthly Delights. And it's even more pronounced if we go to this one. So what I'm arguing is that this ability to see etherically is another of the mysteries of Christian Rosenkreuz. To see what it means to be in an earthly garden, and the sense, as we saw, for what that means in terms of an inner earth, in terms of a depiction of hell. That's like a first etheric engagement. Secondly, with this water, an experience of the etheric in a sense for water. We see this in the middle panel and on the left panel. We can take this up further in terms of what we've been saying about how we saw how things are placed in space, that there's a sense here for how far things need to be from each other in terms of composition. And this would be another etheric experience of being able to judge exactly how things are weighted in their shapes in relation to each other. So this is part of what I was saying with the porcelain, this sense of the surface nature of things, that this gives a sense for form. And this, we remember that this is another way we can speak of the etheric, as that Steiner at other points calls it the etheric formative forces. So we have, first of all, the force that holds us, as I was pointing out, the form that we can feel on the hand, under the hand of the man of Adam to my right, and under the foot of Eve to the left. This touch is this experience of this first level of the etheric, to be standing, or the way the rabbit here sits. But that's slightly different. That's not just touching. The rabbit is sitting in the painting. So these different etheric qualities of how the flow that we saw before, there is a flow of an etheric flow through the painting. There is this touch of the ground supporting the figures that's done again in a very exact way. Then there's this filling of the personality of each of the figures that is breathed in to each of the figures. And within this, there's this sense of, and this doesn't come everywhere, but at different points you'll find, like with this rabbit here, a sense for the fullness, the warmth that is held at different points deeper in the painting and sometimes more to the foreground. And the game that Bosch plays with us, or we could say Christian Rosenkreuz plays with us, is how the music of how we find this warmth through the different figures. If we can then follow that in each of the paintings to discover where is this warmth leading us in the different figures? How can we find that? So in this figure, I'm pointing out this rabbit here. Yeah. This rabbit is inviting us into the depth of the painting. Yeah. So although Christ is looking at us here in his dress, in a formal sense, at the center of the painting, there are other mysteries in the painting that come if we understand what we could call the etheric in terms of warmth. And that, in this one behind me, goes through the rabbit. I don't know if you can follow that, if you can see that. Now, once that's happened, you're going to come to another experience, which is the light ether. So whether this is through the incarnate of the bodies or through Christ's dress or through the light on Eve's hair here, the golden light, or as we saw before, this experience of light is again another masterful way in which Bosch is showing this connection to the etheric. Now, the other two ethers that are spoken about in anthroposophical tradition are the chemical ether, where we have to overcome ourselves, overcome the träg, what's träg? The weighing down of ourselves in matter, in this chemical form, the danger that we fall into unconsciousness. And so to overcome this chemical ether requires this inner act of consciousness. And that's again one of these secrets that I feel with Bosch. And that's why we come to somehow this feeling that it can feel like a mocking. Yeah. It's not really a mocking. If you go into it, this sense of, you might even say humor, you know, people with fish stuck up their backsides, and people being led in living out strange dark fantasies with each other. Let's get an example of this. Yeah. So this is, what was I saying? Strange dark fantasies with each other. Yeah, so this is the depiction from the Garden of Earthly Delights, a bit more close up of, and again, it looks a bit Dali-esque. But yeah, this is this mocking, yeah, and this to overcome. What I'm arguing at here is what we're being shown is someone with an appreciation of what that chemical ether means. Yeah. I mean, again, it's not for nothing that this has been so often associated with alchemy. And they have so, I mean, you could say, oh my God, they have so often people with things stuck up their backside. But there's also, I mean, someone having some kind of strange erotic encounter with a troll or alien figure, and someone sitting under, what is this guy on a throne taking a crap into an egg shape with a man coming out and going down into some hole into the earth, and this man here canoodling with a pig dressed as a nun. Yeah, is it a mocking of the everyday desires of human beings? Or is it suggesting that, or not suggesting even, is it a call to us to objectively look, to bring that to imagination, to say all of it's valid. You can do all of this. Yeah, you can, what's that guy? You can be there. You see this guy here lying on his back being devoured by wild cats. Yeah. This guy here has been caught by a rabbit and he's been strung up, and the rabbit is dissecting his feet or doing some kind of investigation into his feet. It's kind of ridiculous. This guy on some kind of speedboat, again with something up his bottom. These guys, if you look closely, I don't know if you can see these guys. What are these guys? Some wolves and some dragons all eating some guy here. Or these two having a look at that. Again, some machine pumping something into some naked guy up his bum again. And Dali, a knife cut between the ears here, arrow through the ears. People being burnt in hell. And then some medieval sacking of a city, war, rampage. An organ, a heart of pumping out. Even a kind of Mary figure here, yeah? And then a knowing person here. Again, this porcelain quality, the bone quality that is depicted here. So all these things that I was pointing out about how the air fills the human shape, how within that human shape you can see how the human shape touches in an almost 2D sense, how these figures are touching the water. That sense for touch is that other etheric sense that we're talking about. So first we have touch, then we have the flow. Again, we see a flow here down from the sacking of the city, down, flows through the different forms. This sense for how that aspect of the etheric touches, strokes our skin as the water. Then the porcelain quality of how air fills out our shape, our etheric form. With the in-breath, with the out-breath, that we form that outer shell of ourselves. So it's coming in this porcelain quality. And then, like we said, the warmth of finding within that the invitation, first of all, to warmth and then to light through the different forms of color. So if we close our eyes slightly and see then the white forms here on the black background and the little spotlights that we have of fire, you see those forms of light? This sense for the light ether. And then we can seek out where is the warmth? Where are we finding the warmth here in this painting? Now, it might not be as before, as we had with the rabbit. We might have to then search it differently, like as we see here in the red. It may be through this experience that we come to that sense of the warmth ether, or as in this Garden of Earthly Delights, you might have to then go back over into the other panel to see how he's embodying that warmth ether. And then the light ether, as we spoke about how that's woven into the different color use, green to pink to blue to yellow. And then the final one, which is the life ether, that we meet these beings in death. And that's the theme that goes all the way through, from the depictions of hell to the other depictions that open up. This is the other also mocking gesture of the skeletons that's inviting us to recognize this other truth of the life ether that we can come to appreciate if we contemplate more about what it means to experience death and what that shows us about life. And again, this is a very Christian Rosenkreuz way of looking at things if we think of his role as Lazarus. So I'm going to come finally in this exploration to a final painting, which I find is one of my personal favorites from Venice. And this is in a sense where many of these things come together. So you've got quite a beautiful bringing together of all the things that I've mentioned. The sense for how we stand on the earth. The sense in her gesture for how the air fills the space, as if like our lungs in the in-breath and out-breath fill the space from behind to the foreground, from left to right. The almost porcelain shapes of the ground and rock on the left, again, these have parts of this aspect of that we saw in the depictions of the strange figures in hell. Then we see the flow. Look at the flow of the dress. Look at the flow of the different gestures through the painting. And then the sense of warmth. And we can look here at the different reds from the rock just behind her to the right, from the green of the landscape, but then up through the different reds of the different cloths. It's this warmth that we can feel, which is even held by the black. Now, is this a bush? Is this the undergrowth behind this black bush? But in a quite incredible way, this is also holding us in this inner experience, this inner warmth, which then, if we speak of that as a warmth ether, is then inviting in this experience of the light ether. And all of this drama, if we see the monk here, the monk looking down at the man that's fallen into a swoon, and the man holding the Sultan figure here, holding the handkerchief to his brow. And all of the dramas here, as we've seen, this slightly mocking gesture, like all these people doing these ridiculous things that we saw in the depiction of hell. All of this, if we understand rightly what I've been pointing out, as a sense for the chemical ether of how all these elements relate together in a vast cacophony, like in a vast playing of each of the different characters and shapes and forms and colors, and how they all weave in together. But it's how an overcoming of that and an understanding of death, that many of these mysteries of life will only be experienced in death, and the incredible drama of that, if we think about that. And then perhaps to crown all of that, we have this half woman, half male, quite unique figure, I think, in art history, of a kind of woman being crucified. Now, is this a depiction of Christ using that traditional depiction of the crucifixion of Christ? And I'm not going to go into like who this is, which one can find out, and I'll put the reference to this painting from the Prado not the Prado, from Venice. I'll put this in the description. But what I'm more interested in is less who this is and the 16th century depiction of the clothing and the people and who it is commissioned for and all of those things. One can look into that, but I'm looking more into the phenomenology of the sensual depictions here, from this sense for the light ether, and from what it says here about death. And then when one is drawn to this quite incredible expression of the face here. And it's quite incredible if you then follow in your feeling the kind of rose form down to her left leg of the dress, and follow the forms of the sash around her waist and how that hangs in two U shapes. and the cross that holds us and our attention so definitively here. And we have then a back space, a backdrop. We have the back sky, have the landscape with its perspective going right back into the background. And then we have a stage in which the crucifix is planted and the grave underneath. And then we have this whole middle space, as I was pointing out, the middle of to feel our breath in our bodies, to feel the warmth within that breath through the color, to feel how it's woven together, to feel the people standing, appreciating the whole scene, and then to overcome that and appreciate through the gaze of the crucified figure, the gaze on death, the gaze of a conscious awareness of death in life, and seeing God in that sense through that etheric appreciation. And that would be this sevenfold etheric appreciation of reality. So this is something I was trying to point out through the whole thing. And it's a sense for, like I said, rather than intellectually to describe it, which is what I'm intentionally holding back from doing here, rather than intellectually describe the art history, the motivation, the years, the workshop, the career of Hieronymous Bosch, his influences, his teachers. I'm holding back from doing any of that. And I'm really looking at how I'm concentrating more on how this aspect of the astral body of Christian Rosenkreuz can be really felt in this painting. So I'm going to finish off with that and add that onto the back here. Which it's not allowing me to do. So if we'll go full circle. Yeah. Part of this mystery of the astral body of Christian Rosenkreuz. And I think it's an invitation to us for understanding, as I try to point out, these 7 aspects of the etheric. And an awakening in our time to Christ in the etheric is understanding how we can slowly come to appreciate not just art in this way, but to appreciate how the senses are woven around us in a similar way. So whether it's, this was an example today looking through the eyes of this painting, looking through the eyes that can be developed through appreciating art in this way, because in this sense, art is an intensification of what we see around us in the senses in nature. So what we are being granted here is a way to develop our clairvoyant perception etherically of the world around us by starting to appreciate how we can bring these things to imaginative understanding. And that's how we started at the beginning, with describing how the astral body of Christian Rosenkreuz is something that had been transformed through the Ich into a spirit self. And part of that personality that we can feel of Christian Rosenkreuz can also inspire us in everyday life, in our sensual experience of it, to awaken to how the spiritual is speaking to us through that sensual experience of life. And there's another related theme to this, that this life devoted to spiritual science, to the esoteric, to understanding anthroposophy, is very much where we can feel this presence of Christian Rosenkreuz. And if we think of the tradition of Hiram Abif and how he's so highly held within Freemasonic circles, we can understand part of also the mystery of how within our own souls we can make a connection to this being, and how Christian Rosenkreuz can speak to us and inspire us toward a life devoted to esoterics. And this is something that many of us have felt in our lives, that a change, a turning point that can come many times, where we realize that what we are really living for is understanding of these mysteries, these esoteric mysteries, and that's really our goal in life, is to understand more and more how these things are interwoven and how these things fit together. And in that sense, that's also, and I'll put this also in the description below, about how one is called, feels called by Christian Rosenkreuz within life. And Steiner speaks about how that can come at a moment where one feels as if saved from what, if had continued in the normal course of life, would have resulted in one's death. And if we think about that, again, that's a very interesting reflection when we bring that in relation to the life ether, as we have seen in all these depictions of Bosch, of death, because we can see there that aspect of a living etheric connection to Christian Rosenkreuz that can arise through having come to certain positions in life where one saw one cannot go further in that direction. That would have been the end of one's life, and that what happens after that moment is that a new life has been granted. Anyway, I'll put that also in the description below. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Try and get greater reach, and you'll be informed when I do more on this. Plus, any comments, I'd love to have any feedback. I get feedback every now and again about the things I'm doing, and that's how I decide what to do for the next video. So thanks to everyone who gave me feedback, because it helps me change the focus and the content of some of the things that I'm doing. And that's how we also came to today, so that I can speak further about some of these kind of lesser known aspects of details of things that were given in anthroposophy but haven't necessarily been developed specifically further. And this is how I came also to this connection between Bosch and the astral body of Christian Rosenkreuz, which I would appreciate if anyone has that reference. I would love to have that reference, but I couldn't find it anymore on RS Archive. Anyway, thanks a lot. and I shall see you soon. Ciao, ciao.